What would you do if the woman your brother just married didn't even exist? Not as in, she changed her name or she had secrets. I mean, her entire identity was fabricated. From her education to her accent, even her family, fake. And my brother. He was so in love, so blinded by her charm that he never saw it coming. My name's Audrey. I'm 32, and I've been happily married to Michael, a trauma surgeon for 5 years now. My younger brother, Kyle, has always been my closest friend. We grew up thick as thieves. He was the first person I called when I landed my first job, and I was the one he called when he got his first heartbreak. So when he invited Michael and me to his destination wedding in Napa Valley, it felt like everything was coming full circle. Kyle had found the one, or so we all believed. We arrived at the Silverado Resort on a sun-drenched Thursday afternoon 3 days before the wedding. As our car wound through the manicured vineyards, I couldn't help but feel like we were stepping into a dream. Rolling hills, mountain views, the scent of jasmine in the air. It was the stuff of wedding blogs and Pinterest boards. When we pulled up to the estate Kyle had rented, he ran down the front steps like a kid on Christmas morning. "There they are!" he shouted, pulling me into a bear hug that nearly lifted me off my feet. He looked so happy, so at peace. I hadn't seen him this light in years. Michael shook his hand and Kyle clapped him on the back. "You two are gonna love this place," he said. "And Madison's even better than I told you. You'll see at the welcome dinner." I'd only met Madison twice before, once over a quick Christmas dinner, and again briefly at their engagement party. Both times she'd been polite, poised with the kind of practiced elegance that made me feel a little too Midwestern in comparison. I'd never had a reason to dislike her, but she'd never quite felt real. "Where is she now?" I asked as Kyle helped with our luggage. "Getting ready with her bridesmaids. You'll see her soon. Trust me, she's incredible." Our room was in the east wing of the estate, separate from the bridal party. When I stepped inside, I was blown away. Private balcony overlooking the vineyards, a bathroom bigger than our first apartment, and a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. As I unpacked, Michael flopped onto the mattress with a satisfied sigh. "This place must have cost a fortune," he muttered. "Madison's parents are covering most of it," I replied. "Her dad apparently owns half of Seattle or something." That night, the welcome dinner sparkled under fairy lights strung across the courtyard. Long wooden tables formed a horseshoe around a flower-draped arch. It was magical. And then I saw her Madison floating through the crowd in a white cocktail dress, blonde hair cascading in waves, greeting guests like she'd known them forever. "Audrey!" she exclaimed, rushing toward me with open arms. "Kyle says you two were inseparable growing up. I need all the embarrassing stories." She laughed lightly, her perfect white teeth gleaming, her tone warm and bubbly. But something about it felt rehearsed, like she was hitting a mark, not making a connection. Still, I smiled and hugged her back. I introduced her to Michael. She gave him a dazzling smile. "The handsome doctor," she said knowingly. "Kyle told me you made attending physician at Chicago Memorial impressive." Michael raised his eyebrows, pleasantly surprised she remembered. "Thank you," he said. "And you just finished your MBA at Stanford, right?" I asked, trying to make conversation. "Oh, that was nothing," she said with a self-effacing shrug. "My father has connections, so I've been lucky with job offers. Throughout dinner, I watched her work the room like a seasoned politician. She knew everyone's name." She laughed at the right moments. She asked my father, who runs a green energy investment firm, deep, insightful questions about his business. He looked downright enchanted. "She's quite the charmer," Michael whispered, sipping his wine. "She makes Kyle happy," I said quietly. "That's all that matters." The next day was the rehearsal, and Madison was running it like a general in a wedding dress. Efficient, sweet, a little too polished. There was one strange moment I couldn't shake. I was heading to the bathroom in the main house when I heard her voice behind a closed bedroom door. It wasn't her usual melodic tone. It was clipped, cold. "I don't care what it takes," she said, "just handle it. We've come too far to mess this up now." My hand froze on the doorknob. Moments later, she emerged, smile wide, tone light. "Audrey, just a minor flower emergency. Nothing to worry about." I forced a smile back, but something tugged at me. A whisper, a warning. And it wasn't the last time I'd hear her say something that didn't quite match her mask. That evening during the rehearsal dinner, she gave a touching speech about finding home with Kyle and our family. My mom cried. My dad smiled proudly, but I kept remembering the tone I'd heard behind that door, and the phone case in her hand, a blue one, which was odd because the next day at breakfast she had a red phone case, and the day before that, a different red one. Michael noticed too. Maybe one's for wedding planning, he offered, or something else entirely, I replied. At the time, I didn't know how right I was, but the real shock, the thing that would shatter everything we thought we knew about Madison, that was still to come. By the time brunch rolled around the next morning, I was still brushing off that weird hallway encounter with Madison. But Michael, he wasn't. He'd been quiet all morning, sipping his coffee slower than usual, his eyes scanning the terrace like he was on call for surgery. We were sitting under a white umbrella, the vineyard stretching out beyond us in neat green rows, when Madison breezed in like a summer breeze. White sundress, bare shoulders, effortless beauty. She was radiant, greeting everyone with kisses on the cheek, calling out names like she'd known each guest for years. "You two are up early," she chirped, sliding into the chair beside my dad. We couldn't resist this view. I smiled. Madison nodded knowingly, then glanced at her phone. This time it was back to the blue case. Michael nudged me under the table. A few minutes later, she excused herself to check on the chef phone in hand. Michael leaned toward me. "Did you catch that switch again?" "The phone case," I whispered. He nodded. "Yesterday red, today blue, day before 2 different versions of red. I've worked in trauma wards for a decade, Audrey. When something doesn't line up, I pay attention. I didn't want to say it, but I felt it too. Especially when I walked inside to grab a sweater and caught Madison mid-conversation in one of the side rooms, her back to me, speaking in a low, sharp voice. No mistakes. Everything needs to be in place by Sunday. The accounts should be accessible by then." My breath hitched. When she turned and saw me, she didn't even flinch. "Wedding planner," she said with a bright eye roll, sliding her phone into her purse. "Always a mini fire to put out." I nodded, trying to ignore the fact that her wedding planner was a man named Jeffrey, and the voice I'd heard her call Sweetie on that call, very much female. By mid-afternoon, the bridal party was off for final fittings. I was one of the bridesmaids, though not the maid of honor. That honor belonged to Madison's cousin Stephanie. We were shuffled into the estate's glam room, surrounded by curling irons and silk robes. That's when I saw it again, the mask slipping. Madison complimented one bridesmaid's hair with a backhanded comment about how awful the original style looked. When the stylist hesitated about tweaking Madison's updo, she smiled tightly and said, "I think we'll stick to the original plan. It's my special day after all." The others giggled nervously. Then came the moment that really chilled me. I was chatting with Stephanie during a break. Trying to make small talk, I brought up Madison's Stanford MBA. Stephanie blinked. "Stanford? Wait. No, I thought she went to UCLA." My heart skipped. "Oh, maybe I'm mixing it up," she added quickly. "So many cousins, it gets confusing." Before I could ask more, Madison appeared, linking her arm through Stephanie's. "What are you two gossiping about?" she said with a breezy smile, but I caught the subtle edge in her voice. Something about the way Stephanie straightened her shoulders told me everything I needed to know. People weren't relaxed around Madison. They were performing, just like she was. Later that afternoon, I watched Madison absolutely eviscerate her wedding planner. Jeffrey had brought up a minor issue with the table layout. "I don't pay you to bring me problems, Jeffrey," she snapped. "I pay you to solve them." The air in the room chilled, but then she noticed me watching. Her face softened instantly. She touched Jeffrey's arm and said in a warm voice, "I'm sorry. Pre-wedding stress is making me a monster. Of course, arrange the tables however you think is best." Jeffrey smiled weakly and backed away like a man escaping a landmine. I caught his expression, not annoyance, fear. That night, as the bridesmaids had dinner together at a nearby restaurant, Madison left the table multiple times to take calls. Each time she returned a little more tense, her brightness a bit more brittle. When we returned to the estate, I found Michael waiting in the lobby. "How was your evening?" I asked, falling into step beside him. "Interesting," he said slowly. "Kyle's friends are great, but something's off." "But what?" He hesitated. "Kyle says he and Madison met at a charity auction, that he outbid her for a trip to Costa Rica. But tonight one of her friends told me Madison always says they met when she spilled coffee on him at a cafe." I frowned. "Different stories?" I asked. Michael nodded. "Two completely different origin stories, which is weird, right? How do you mix that up?" Maybe they had two meetings close together," I offered, but I didn't believe it. Not really. That night, lying in bed, I replayed everything in my mind. The shifting phone cases, the double phone calls, the controlling tone, Stephanie's confusion, the way Madison could morph in and out of personalities like changing outfits. Still, I told myself it was probably just nerves. Pre-wedding chaos. Big weddings bring big emotions. But deep down, I didn't believe my own excuses anymore. And Michael. He wasn't making excuses at all. If I'd taken a picture that morning, it would have looked like perfection. Sunlight streamed through gauzy curtains. Birds chirped outside over the rustling of vineyard leaves. Staff in white uniforms bustled about the garden, arranging rows of white chairs and draping roses over a rustic wooden arch. It was the kind of morning little girls imagine when they dream of their wedding day. But as I sipped coffee on our balcony, I couldn't ignore the tension in my chest. And when I looked over at Michael, still in pajama pants staring at his phone, brow furrowed, I knew he felt it too. Still thinking about last night, I asked gently. "I can't shake the feeling," he said. "Something's wrong with her." I didn't respond. What could I say that I'd overheard her whispering about account access, that she was using multiple phones and identities, that even her so-called cousin didn't know which university she went to? We both knew it. Something was off about Madison. Still, it was Kyle's wedding day, and whatever doubts I had, I wasn't about to ruin it. Not yet. I joined the bridal party in the estate's glam suite just before noon. The room was chaos-curling iron champagne glasses, women in silk robes snapping selfies. And in the middle of it all, Madison. Calm. Serene. Beautiful. "Come sit with me," she said, patting the chair beside her. She handed me a small velvet box. "I wanted you to have this." Inside was a silver bracelet with a single pearl. "It's to thank you," she said softly, "for welcoming me into your family. Kyle told me you've always been his rock. Your approval means everything." I felt my throat tighten. Was this all in my head? Was I projecting? The gesture was so sweet, so genuine. "Thank you," I whispered, clasping it around my wrist. The ceremony was nothing short of breathtaking. Madison walked down the aisle to a gentle piano melody, her designer gown catching the sunlight just so. Kyle's expression pure awe. I watched my brother's face as she approached. He was in love, unquestionably. Their vows were personal, tearful. When Madison said Kyle was her forever home, my mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. And for a moment, I believed it too. But during the reception, the cracks reappeared. Madison floated between tables like a queen, charming everyone, especially my parents. She filled their wine glasses, leaned in close when she spoke, laughed at every story my dad told. And then I noticed something else. She was guiding conversations. She kept my father in long discussions with her father, Robert, the silver-haired man with steely eyes and an accent I couldn't quite place. They were talking investment strategies, markets. At one point, I overheard Robert say, "Thomas, with your experience in sustainable energy and my network in Asia, we could truly disrupt the sector." My dad nodded enthusiastically. "I've been looking for an inroad to that market for years. I have ways around the regulatory barriers," Robert replied smoothly. I froze. That wasn't casual small talk. That was a pitch. And my father, he was intrigued. Later, I whispered to Michael, "Have you noticed how interested she is in Dad's business?" He nodded. "Noticed, I've been documenting it." He lifted his phone slightly. "You're taking pictures." Not for the scrapbook, he said. I want to remember who she talks to, how she moves. It's calculated. He said it like a diagnosis, and in that moment I realized he'd shifted from suspicion to certainty, but there was more. I looked around the room and realized Madison barely had any actual family there. Aside from Stephanie and a couple who said they were her aunt and uncle, most of the people around her were strangers. Her supposed Stanford friends, absent. No childhood besties, no sorority sisters, just her parents and a dozen unfamiliar faces. Doesn't that seem strange? I asked Michael quietly. Very, he said, and her accent. She adjusts it depending on who she's talking to. With your dad, she sounds West Coast. With her uncle, Mid-Atlantic. She's mirroring, I said slowly, or performing. The rest of the night passed in a haze. Madison danced with my father, graceful, composed. She posed for pictures, gave a flawless thank you speech, even sang along to a Sinatra song with Kyle during the couple's dance. But by the time we made it back to our room, something inside me had shifted. I didn't trust her. And Michael. He was already several steps ahead. The morning after the wedding, the estate garden was buzzing with the slow rhythm of recovery. Guests in sunglasses sipped Bloody Marys and mimosa refills while nursing champagne hangovers. The wedding had gone off like a dream, or at least that's what everyone thought. Except Michael. He'd been pacing since sunrise. At brunch, we sat at the family table beneath a trellis of hanging wisteria. My parents were glowing, basking in the warmth of compliments about the wedding and how Madison had brought new life into the family. Isn't she just wonderful, my mother gushed, watching Madison laugh at something a groomsman said. So accomplished, so poised. She's a star, my dad added, leaning in. Her father and I had a fascinating conversation last night. We're meeting next week in Chicago to discuss some potential joint ventures. I stiffened. Wait, Dad, you're actually thinking of investing with someone you just met? I asked. Robert isn't just anyone, he said, sounding mildly insulted. He's built a solid portfolio across international markets. He understands the nuances, and he understands my work. Before I could respond, Michael's phone buzzed again. He looked down. His face hardened. I need to step away, he murmured, rising from the table. I watched him walk to the edge of the vineyard, speaking in hushed, intense tones. 15 minutes later, he returned. His jaw was clenched tight. He sat beside me and leaned in. We need to leave. Now. What, are you serious? I whispered. He nodded, once, eyes flicking toward Madison. It's about the bride. I went still. What the hell are you talking about? You really didn't notice? He asked quietly. Notice what Michael... He turned to me fully, then eyes locked onto mine. Madison Wilson doesn't exist. Your brother married a con artist. My blood ran cold. I stared at him, heart pounding. What are you saying? He pulled out his phone, showed me a folder of images and documents. I knew something was wrong. After the rehearsal dinner, I asked a college friend in private security to run a background check, just in case. What came back this morning confirmed everything. The screen showed a driver's license, Erica Donovan. The face was unmistakably Madison, only with shorter, darker hair. She was married to a hedge fund manager in Boston. Disappeared with $2 million shortly after gaining access to his clients. I scrolled more photos, articles, names. Catherine Miller, Allison Kerr. Different aliases, different lives. Each story the same marriage, trust theft, disappearance. I felt sick. She's been doing this for years, Michael said. She builds the perfect image, gets close to wealthy families through love, then vanishes with everything. But why Kyle? I whispered. He doesn't have that kind of money. He wasn't the target, Michael replied grimly. Your father was. Kyle was just the way in. I couldn't breathe. Michael continued. She plants accomplices as family. Stephanie, the fake parents. Uses charm to access financial data. That call you overheard about the accounts, that wasn't wedding talk. It was timing. She's been preparing to strike. Tears welled in my eyes. We have to warn my family. Michael nodded. But we need proof. More than this. She's careful. If we go too early, she'll disappear again. How she's already planted a keylogger on your dad's laptop, he said. My contact traced the activity this morning. It's been capturing everything. Passwords, emails, financials. I covered my mouth. Michael grabbed my hand. We need help. I called Jen, a college friend who worked in cybersecurity. I gave her the story stripped down just enough. Can you check my father's systems? Quietly, not legally, she said, unless he gives permission. I called Dad. Michael's got a colleague who's interested in your investment models. Would you be okay if Jen took a look to help explain? He agreed, without hesitation. 2 hours later, Jen called back. Her voice was tight. Someone installed a keylogger on your dad's laptop 3 days ago. Sophisticated. It's been logging everything and transmitting to a remote server. Can you stop it? I already did, she said. I've wiped it and changed his credentials, but whoever planted it got plenty. I thanked her, hung up, and turned to Michael. He didn't even blink. We go back. Tonight. We packed fast, checked out of our hotel in the nearby town, and returned to the estate just as dinner was winding down. I sent a text to Kyle Need to talk, urgent, about Madison, private. He met us in the library 20 minutes later. He looked tired but happy. Hey, what's going on? Why all the secrecy? I looked at Michael, then back at Kyle. What we're about to say. It's going to sound insane, but I need you to listen. Kyle's smile faded. Okay. Michael opened his laptop. Madison Wilson doesn't exist. Your wife has at least 3 other identities. She's under investigation for financial crimes across the country. Kyle laughed, but it was hollow. What? We showed him everything, photos, documents, articles, the keylogger, proof the pattern of behavior. His hands trembled as he scrolled. This can't be real. My heart broke as I watched his face change. Doubt. Then horror. If this is true, he said, voice cracking, then none of it was real. The door creaked open behind us. Madison stood there. Her smile was tight. What's going on? Kyle turned his face pale. Madison, he said. Or should I call you Erica or Catherine? Which do you prefer? She froze, then smiled just a little too wide. The silence in the room stretched so tight, I swear I could feel it press against my skin. Madison, or whatever her real name was, stood in the doorway of the library in her designer flats and casual sweater, looking for all the world like the loving new wife walking in on a family discussion. But Kyle's voice cut through that illusion like glass. I asked you a question, he said, his tone steady but his hands trembling. Which name do you prefer? Her eyes flicked from him, to me, to Michael, then to the open laptop on the table displaying her many faces, Erica Donovan, Catherine Miller, Madison Wilson. For a heartbeat, she froze. Then, like a switch, she tilted her head and let out a soft, baffled laugh. This is some kind of joke, right? No, Michael said quietly. This is us confronting a fraud before she takes down our entire family. Madison's face fell into a mask of offended confusion. Kyle, sweetheart, you're not really listening to this, are you? Kyle took a deep breath. We have evidence, marriage certificates, financial reports, a background check, proof someone installed spyware on my father's laptop. Still, she tried to hold the line. You're confusing me with someone else. This is crazy. My father entered then, expression grave. I've seen enough. That's when it happened. The moment the mask cracked. Madison's posture changed. Her shoulders squared. Her expression hardened. The warmth drained from her eyes like someone flipping a breaker. A hint of a foreign accent slipped into her voice as she muttered, I underestimated you. Dr. Mitchell. Michael didn't flinch. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Kyle stepped back like he'd been struck. Why, he whispered. Was any of it real? Madison, no Alexandra, we'd later learn, sighed almost annoyed. You were nice, kind. I didn't hate our time together. But business is business. Business, my father growled. She looked at him coolly. Men like you build empires on other people's labor. I just collect my share. I offer an experience, love, excitement, purpose. It has a price. You lied, you stole. I haven't taken a dollar from you." Yet she said, smiling without warmth. And Kyle, he signed a very generous prenup, voluntarily. Michael stepped forward. "A prenup signed under false identity won't hold in court. We've documented your fraud. You'll be facing serious charges." Her lips twitched. "You'd really drag your family through a scandal like that. Headlines about a prominent Chicago investor being duped by a fake socialite. You think your clients won't walk." My father's jaw clenched. She thought she'd found our weak spot, our fear of exposure. But Kyle surprised everyone. "What about the other men?" he asked. "The ones you left bankrupt? You think they all stayed silent, too?" She faltered just slightly. Michael pressed. "Because now there's a pattern. That's federal." Her eyes narrowed. Still, she tried one last play. She reached for her purse. "This conversation is over. I'll be leaving." "Don't bother," I said, blocking the door. "Security knows not to let anyone off the estate." A bluff, but a good one. Real panic flickered in her eyes now. My father pulled out his phone. "While we've been talking, my team's been freezing my accounts and forwarding all this to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're very interested in your activities. You're bluffing." He turned the phone to show the email confirmation from the FBI. Her composure cracked. For the first time since she'd entered, she looked truly frightened. "You won't get far," my father added. "Your accomplices have already bailed. We know Stephanie's real name. And your so-called father. He's tied to 2 other scams. The net is closing." She looked at Kyle, one final plea. "I could have made you happy." Kyle's expression was hollow. "None of it was real. You don't even exist." Silence followed, and then finally she dropped her purse and sat down. "I want a lawyer." The hours that followed were a blur. The FBI moved quickly. By midnight, Alexandra Petrovic was in custody. Her fingerprints matched those tied to multiple fraud cases across the country. She'd been operating under aliases for over a decade. Madison Wilson had been her most recent creation built to infiltrate our family. Her wedding wasn't a celebration. It was a heist in motion. The man posing as her father had vanished, no trace left. Stephanie gone, too. The FBI believed they were part of a rotating team of professional con artists that planted convincing backstories and created social media trails to pass casual scrutiny. Kyle collapsed. My brother had been married less than 48 hours. Now he was giving statements to the authorities, his face pale, his eyes red, unable to eat or sleep. "I loved her," he kept saying. I didn't know. How could he have? She'd studied us for months, hired people to pose as family, manipulated our emotions like a violinist tuning strings. Later, when I sat with him in the quiet of the library, he whispered, "What's wrong with me that I didn't see it?" "Nothing," I said. "You saw what she wanted you to see. She was a professional, but it still hurt. It would always hurt." The day after the arrest, the estate was eerily quiet. The flowers were still fresh. The white chairs still sat in perfect rows. But the illusion had shattered. The dream was over. Our guests were told a carefully sanitized version that Madison had misrepresented herself, and the marriage was being annulled. Some speculated it was a green card issue. Others whispered about a secret criminal past. But only a handful of us knew the full truth. Madison, real name Alexandra Petrovic, was born in Belgrade, Serbia. She'd been running elaborate cons since her late teens, steadily graduating from identity scams to targeted marriage frauds. She'd left behind a trail of bankrupt men, ruined families, and legal shadows. The FBI had been trying to catch her for years. She'd always vanished just in time until now. Kyle didn't leave his room for 2 days. My mother brought him food he didn't touch. My father, normally stoic and composed, spent most of his time making phone calls to lawyers, cyber investigators, and security consultants. But I could see it, his shame. The man who prided himself on reading people had been played like a fiddle. I keep thinking back, he told me quietly one night as we sat in his study. She knew about my Sherman diversification model. That's not public. I've never shared that with anyone outside the firm. She saw what mattered to you, I said gently, and she mirrored it. It was never about love, it was always about access. He nodded. But I let her in. I brought her into our family. She fooled all of us. Michael had already sent all evidence to the FBI and coordinated with his contact in private security. Within days, they confirmed that Alexandra had used at least 6 identities in the last decade, with connections to nearly a dozen fraud rings. Stephanie, the so-called cousin, real name Layla Merkovich. She'd posed as a bridesmaid twice before in similar scams. The man pretending to be her father was more elusive. He was suspected of orchestrating the ring. The FBI believed he used women like Alexandra to infiltrate wealthy families while he handled the money laundering and overseas transfers. But Alexandra had made a mistake. She fell for the one trap she hadn't anticipated: a close-knit family that listened to its gut, that refused to ignore the red flags. Jen, my friend in cybersecurity, later confirmed that Alexandra's keylogger had been quietly transmitting data until the exact moment she was arrested. If we'd waited even one more day, she might have drained my father's accounts and disappeared. Kyle eventually emerged from his room, gaunt, quiet but awake. He moved back in with our parents for a while. He couldn't return to the San Francisco apartment he'd shared with Madison. He said the walls felt haunted. We all took turns calling him daily. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes we'd just sit in silence on the phone. 3 months later, he moved to Chicago. He got a job at a tech firm downtown. Quiet role project management. Something stable. Something safe. 6 months after the wedding, he went on his first date, a woman named Erica from accounting. He told me about it over coffee with a small smile. She was kind, real. It didn't turn into a relationship, but it was a beginning. A year after the wedding, we gathered again. This time, no champagne, no flowers, just family and dinner. Kyle cracked jokes. My mother laughed. My father asked his advice about a new startup he was investing in. It wasn't healing in a grand, sweeping way. It was healing in small, slow pieces. After dessert, Kyle raised his glass. "You know what I've learned from all this?" he asked. We looked at him quiet. It's not that people can't be trusted. It's that trust isn't a gift. It's a process. Real love doesn't isolate you from the people who care about you. It makes your circle stronger, not smaller. My mother nodded through misty eyes. Real love doesn't ask you to give up your family. It weaves itself into it. Michael squeezed my hand under the table. In a strange way, all of this had made our marriage even stronger. His intuition, his patience, his quiet pursuit of the truth, it had saved us all. The FBI continued building their case. Alexandra, now sitting in federal custody, was tied to 5 confirmed scams across the country. Her accomplices were slowly being identified. A few had already been arrested. Others were still on the run. But the net was closing. The man who'd posed as her father, still out there. The agency believed he was the mastermind, rotating young women through different personas, setting them up with fabricated backstories, social media, even family photos. They'd found a storage unit registered under one of Alexandra's aliases, containing folders with surveillance photos, personal data, and psychological profiles. She'd studied us, our routines, our weaknesses. There was a folder labeled Thomas Reynolds, entry point via Kyle, estimated timeline 14-18 months. That was how close she had come to destroying us. I still wear the silver bracelet she gave me, not as a keepsake, but as a reminder. That evil doesn't always look like chaos. Sometimes it looks like a perfect bride in a sundress, handing you a gift with tears in her eyes. If you've ever had that gut feeling that something wasn't quite right about someone, listen to it. Whether it's a friend, a stranger, or even someone your family trusts, listen. Look closer. Because real love doesn't flinch under scrutiny. It grows stronger. Have you ever seen someone manipulate their way into a family's trust? Have you ever been blindsided by someone who seemed perfect? Share your story in the comments below. Let someone else learn from it. And if this story helped you spot a red flag or feel less alone, please like, subscribe, and share. Let's build relationships that are real and protect the ones we love. Thank you for listening.